Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Amatzia Baram. I am the head of the Center for Iraq Studies at the University of Haifa, and I'm teaching. I'm now, well, let's say pensioned off. And unlike most of my friends who were pensioned off and felt very depressed, I'm suffering from too much life happiness. Because I think this is a heaven itself. But in any case, we discussed here and today a fascinating subject, to my mind, very practical and very important right away, right now, which is Iraq failure of federalism. I didn't define the title, but it's a good title, at least in my view. And we have here today 3 participants. Number 4 is not coming. Okay, so we should just have a little more time. Each one of you has 12, 13 minutes to speak. If you go to 15, I'll have to stop you, friends. And I intend to do it, so take it into account. The first speaker will be, the first speaker will be Minister Falah Mustafa Bakir. He is defined officially as head of the KRG Department of Foreign Relations. To tell you what it means, he perhaps wouldn't like it, but I'm telling you he's the foreign minister of the Kurdish government in Erbil. And we are very happy and lucky to get you, sir. Minister, I would like you to come and talk to us.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here and talk to you about the Kurdish perspective from Iraq and also about our experience whether Iraq has failed or it's on the right path towards a federal system. Indeed, it's one thing to read about this in the books, or foreigners to talk about the history of Iraq or the components of Iraqi society, and it's a totally different thing for you to have lived there and have suffered from the oppression. Since Iraq was established, of course, Iraq is an artificial state. It was put together to keep some balances. It was the same old story which has become another source of conflict in our part of the world, the Shia-Sunni power struggle. When the desire was to have a Sunni king for Iraq, the Shias constituted the majority. Therefore, the Kurds, unfortunately, were attached to that Iraq to keep the balance for Iraq to be ruled by the Sunni. So anything that is built on wrong foundations would not be able to survive. Therefore, it has to be remedied. So that is the history of Iraq. Since Iraq was established, we were promised to be equal partners in this country. We were promised that Kurdish language would be the second official language in the country. We were promised with equal rights in that country, but Kurds never have felt that they were treated equally, nor have they felt that they had any equality in any of the systems of governance in Iraq. So that continued. It continued, and year after year it became worse until we have seen the worst of the crimes that were committed against the Kurdish people, and namely under the Ba'ath regime. So our history in being part of Iraq was the destruction of 4,500 villages of Kurdistan that were razed to the ground, the disappearance of 182,000 people in the notorious Anfal operations. And by the way, Anfal is the name of a verse of Quran that were used by the Iraqi Arabs or the regime of Iraq against the Kurds. And the Kurds are supposed to be Muslims as well. So we don't understand why that, because in the history, Anfal was a word that was used by Muslims against the infidels. So Kurds were not infidels. We had the chemical gassing of Halabja, and we had the disappearance of 8,000 Barzani men and the disappearance of 12,000 Faili Kurds. So this is altogether our history in living together with an Iraq that we were supposed to be equal partners of that country. But against that background, in 1991, this is where the Kurdish spring started. We went to elections that we wanted to build democratic institutions and to build a better future for the people of Kurdistan. So we elected our parliament and we formed our government. In October 1992, the parliament in Kurdistan opted for a federal system. We knew that alone we cannot do it. Federalism needs both sides, Kurdistan and the rest of Iraq. But still, it was our hope that one day when Iraq becomes democratic, we will have an opportunity to enjoy a better future, a future that would be different from the past that we had enjoyed. So we decided for federalism at a time we were free from Saddam Hussein's control, and Kurdistan was almost independent from 1991 until 2003. So we had our own parliament, our own government, we were running our own affairs, we were conducting our own international relations. Even the currency which was in circulation in Kurdistan was different from the currency that was circulating in the rest of Iraq, i.e. we were using the original Iraqi currency and the rest of Iraq was using the reprinted Iraqi money. The purchasing power of the money was higher in Kurdistan, the value of the currency was higher in Kurdistan, and so on and so forth. But we decided to join. After 9/11, the situation has changed. When we realized there was a decision to remove Saddam Hussein from power, we accepted to be part of that. And we went to Baghdad. We were heavily engaged in order to build a better Iraq and a better future for us within Iraq. Therefore, we wanted to strengthen the principles of federalism, of sharing the power and wealth in that country. And we meant it, and we wanted it, because our leadership is realistic, pragmatic, and we do understand where do we live. Our neighbors are neither Switzerland, nor Belgium, nor Germany. So I believe whoever is familiar with the Middle East, they understand what do I mean by that, because we are surrounded by countries, and we have Kurdish populations in Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. So we are the largest nation in the world that we do not have a state of our own. We have been divided against our will to be treated as minorities in these countries. So therefore, our leadership understood this reality. We wanted to build a better future for the people of Kurdistan within the boundaries of Iraq. And we wanted to do so, but on the principles of partnership. We wanted genuine partnership in Iraq. Of course, we had certain objectives to meet in Iraq. First, the Iraqi army. We very much wanted the Iraqi army to be an army that would protect the peoples of Iraq from external threats, to be an army that would be a professional, that would be loyal to the country and loyal to all the peoples of the country, not to be sectarian and not to be ethnic, to be a national army for Iraq. So the first 3 brigades of the Iraqi army were made up of the Kurdish Peshmerga forces, because at that time, neither the Shias nor the Sunnis were not ready to be part of it. But as we made progress, more and more when the ruling groups in Baghdad got strengthened, they were hostile to the Kurds and they diminished the number and the participation of the Kurds in the Iraqi army until we ended up with an army which proved to be sectarian. The issue of oil, it was important for us, and we have decided very clearly that oil, which was a source of curse in the past, we wanted to turn that into a source of blessing so that we benefit from the resources so that we can develop Kurdistan and the rest of Iraq. But we were not ready to give control of oil again to Baghdad and for us to be at the mercy of Baghdad. So therefore, we fought for the constitution that made it clear that we have a say in our future and we control the oil as well. That oil belongs to all the people in Iraq in all the regions and governorates, and the revenues will be shared among Iraqis. But unfortunately, Baghdad doesn't want that. Baghdad is used to control and wants to continue to control. For us, Baghdad is the same Baghdad. It is not different whether the Sunnis control Baghdad or the Shias control Baghdad, because it means that we are denied of our rights. And if Iraq is to succeed, then there has to be equality and justice and genuine partnership, Kurds, Shias, and Sunnis to enjoy their rights. And we do not want to see an Iraq that succeeds at the expense of Kurds and Kurdistan. We want Iraq to succeed, an Iraq that is at peace with its own communities, an Iraq that's at peace with its neighbors, an Iraq where Iraqi decisions are made in Baghdad and not elsewhere. On the issue of budget, we wanted to have a system of governance by which we receive our fair share from Baghdad uninterrupted, so that automatically Kurdistan receives its fair share of the budget. But that was not arranged. It was put in such a way that the Ministry of Finance and the Prime Minister in Baghdad would be able to decide whether the budget of Kurdistan would be sent or not. So I can continue talking about many issues between Erbil and Baghdad. If I specifically talk about a couple of them, this would be budget would be one, oil is the second, and third would be the issue of the Peshmerga forces. Kurdish Peshmerga forces were recognized in the constitution of Iraq that they are part of the Iraqi national defense system. So they were supposed to be paid, equipped, trained, and armed by the federal government. None of these things have happened, and they have not been paid since the overthrow of the former regime. Which means that we were the only one in Iraq that were talking about a federal system in the country. The rest talk about a central government. And for us, it's over. We do not accept another central government. For them, it meant that they want to have a strong central government in power in Baghdad. We call it a federal government at the center. Geographically, Baghdad is at the center, but we do not want to have a centralized government. So therefore, what we have seen, they have emptied federalism from its essential points, its basic principles. For Iraq to succeed, it has to be plural, democratic, and federal. It's not easy to be democratic because you have to have a democratic culture. You have to have democratic elite. You have to have people who believe in it, people who are ready to accept others. Still, we have a problem of Arabs feeling that they are superior to the Kurds, as if we are inferior and second or third class citizens. We will never accept it. Indeed, I have to be honest with you, my generation is better than the generation that comes after me. At least I can speak some Arabic, but the new generation, they don't speak Arabic and they don't want to learn it. They very much want to learn English. Some of them are learning Turkish, some of them are learning Farsi, but not that much Arabic. It's not something that we as government encourage it or not. Because Baghdad is not doing what London is doing towards Scotland. Okay? People were following the events. People in Kurdistan follow the events in Catalonia, in Scotland, and elsewhere, wherever there is any talk about referendum. So therefore, the people have to see some change in Baghdad. What we have seen in the last few years, Baghdad pushing us out of Iraq. Baghdad not attracting the Kurds into Iraq. Therefore, people have to see more from Baghdad so that they can say that we are proud Iraqis. Go to Erbil, Slemani, and Duhok and tell them, where are you from? They say Kurdistan. Although they may carry an Iraqi passport and travel, but still they tell you, I'm from Kurdistan. So you have, if you want people to be loyal to a country, you have to provide that kind of environment for people to feel that there is a sense of belonging. So therefore, it's not about rules and regulations. It's not about agreements. We have signed many agreements with Baghdad. Indeed, the Maliki government, the former prime minister, he was in power as a result of the Erbil agreement, which brought about a new cabinet. But all the agenda and the agreement that we have made, not a single item of it was implemented on the ground, which takes us to the situation that we have to think about. It's easy to reach an agreement with them, but it's not easy to reach an implementation of that agreement. So therefore, today we are facing a new reality. So to sum it up, ISIS has changed the equation. In June, when it came, ISIS was able to control 1/3 of Iraqi territory because of the failure of the former Prime Minister Maliki, because his failure in turning the Iraqi army into a sectarian army, his failure in order to marginalize the Sunnis and to neglect the Kurds, and he wanted to impose the will of the Shias over the Kurds. Indeed, sometimes people say his own party, not even all the Shias, because other Shia groups also had problems with. So we are facing a new reality. Therefore, we decided to join the new government and give this period between now and the end of the year to see how would the new government in Baghdad would react to the Kurdish demands, to see whether is there any chance for us to build that Iraq that we have all wanted. What Kurds want, to have more political power, more economic power, and more sovereignty in being within Iraq. We do not want to be subjugated by Baghdad, and we do not want Baghdad to determine our future. We want the people of Kurdistan to exercise the right to self-determination and for them to determine their own future. If there is political will in Baghdad, we will be able to make it. But if not, then it is a difficult thing. As a result of that, we are today in Kurdistan fighting the terrorists of ISIS on a battlefront which is 1,035 kilometers long. And we are caring for 1.6 million internally Iraqi displaced people and 270,000 Syrian refugees who are in Kurdistan. Indeed, we are proud that our door has been opened to Christians, to Muslims, to Yazidis, to Arabs, Turkmens, Sunnis, and Shias. But even with that, Baghdad has not been helpful. Baghdad could have done more in order to support us militarily and in terms of humanitarian assistance. Indeed, from the beginning of this year until now, we have not received our budget from Baghdad. So with all these fighting terrorism and fighting ISIS, caring for this number of refugees and IDPs, we are 3 months behind in paying the salaries of the Peshmergas who are fighting in the front line and the government employees in Kurdistan. For us to be thinking in a better way towards Baghdad, Baghdad needs to change its attitude towards Kurdistan so that we can have the feeling of being partners in the same country. Therefore, I think I would be able to continue talking about Baghdad, but I will stop here and I would welcome any question that you have. We have decided willingly to be part of a federal, democratic, pluralistic Iraq, but that decision has to be reciprocated by Baghdad to accept partnership and power sharing and wealth sharing. Otherwise, it will not succeed, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Very powerful presentation. Expect questions, as I said. There's a change in the order, and I'd like Dr. Ronen Zeidel to come to the rostrum.
Thank you, Amatzia, especially for the invitation for a little contrapunto, critical dialogue with regard to what I'm going to say. Now, Minister Bakir is Kurdish, speaking for the Kurds. General Sattler is American. He will probably represent the American point of view. Amatzia Baram is the moderator, so he can be in Israeli, and it's not really a side to whatever we say here. Who am I representing? This question will be repeated later on. I will be speaking for the Sunnis, believe it or not. I am not a Sunni. I am a Jewish Israeli.
You're a Jewish Sunni?
Jewish Sunni. No, I'm Shia. I am a Jewish Shiite. I am a Jewish Shia. Okay. Closer to the Shia, studying the Sunnis sometimes. And I'm going to ask myself some questions because I'm going to refer to the title of this roundtable, federalism or failure, failure or federalism, both, or something like this. So I'm going to ask myself, was there a prospect, a real prospect of Sunni acceptance of federalism? Was it realistic? And I don't think so. The Sunnis never accepted the major change of 2003. They only adjusted to it. The Sunnis were heavily invested in the process of formation of Iraq as a centralized state, and federalism is a major change to that pattern. With all due respect to Mosul being Iraq's biggest Sunni city, as we now hear now and then, you know, Baghdad still has the country's biggest Sunni population, and this city strongly supports centralization. Sunnis and Shiis alike in Baghdad support centralization from different points of view. The recent history of federalism in post-2003 Iraq shows that Sunnis started playing with the term relatively late, and only after the Kurds, who had been there since the 90s, and some Shi'i parties, not all of them. Moreover, this discourse was spread almost exclusively by Sunni politicians in the provincial administration and their cronies, and was not universally embraced by all Sunnis. So you can understand that provincial politicians, the likes of Nujaifi, all of them, the likes of Ahmed al-Jabouri, who now is Minister of Provincial Affairs and was the governor of Salah ad-Din until recently, they all have interests. They all have vested interests in federalism. So obviously they are going to arrange everything they say around the demand, the claim for federalism. I'm not so sure that the majority of Sunnis ever accepted that. Most Sunni provinces lack a distinctiveness of their own and do not produce a strong regional identity to sustain a federal arrangement. So if we are far from even being a Scotland here. Scotland still has something to sustain a kind of a secession or something like this, a specific identity or something like. We are far from being that, and you know how it ended up in Scotland, you know. They lack significant natural resources and are landlocked. All the provinces are landlocked. There are no significant natural resources there. So why should they support federalism? The whole federal discourse, the one I know, stemming from the provinces, revolved around budgetary issues and the distribution of finances. It was not based on a more profound vision of federalism. You need to have a more profound vision of federalism to sustain this kind of a talk, you know. One can assume that if it would ever come into being, it would not be in the form of federal states. We are now in the District of Columbia, aren't we? No, we are in Arlington, so this is not the District of Columbia, but just across the bridge we have the District of Columbia, showing how profound the federal idea is in this state here. So, but this is not the case in Iraq, certainly not the case in Iraq, certainly not in the Sunni provinces. One can assume that if it would ever come into being, it would not be federal states, but in the form of fiefs held by tribal sheikhs and strongmen, and these are trademarks of a failed state and not of a federal state. Now I ask myself another question. I'm speaking for the Sunnis. What Sunnis am I speaking for? Who are these Sunnis? I have been asked to outlay the Sunni positions, but who are those Sunnis? After 2003, Sunni identity in Iraq is still half-baked. And the biggest contributors to its construction, to the fact that we do have a Sunni identity in Iraq now, are, believe it or not, the Shi'i government and ISIS. Not all Sunnis are under one roof. Are we talking about Sunni politicians who now espouse the idea of decentralization and a federal status to the Sunni provinces? Or about the Sunni intelligentsia who still abhors any manifestation of Sunni and Shi'i sectarianism and mostly stand for a centralized Iraq? These guys have deluded the Sunni identity to the point of non-existence. So the last thing they are interested in is that somebody would reassert their Sunni identity for them. They are intellectuals, they are quite influential, and their identity is not that strong. Are we speaking about the Sunni tribes who would convert federalism into a system of tribal fiefs based on anachronistic notions? And we know that they are interested to reintroduce all those anachronistic notions. Are we talking about the Baathists who hesitate between having a Sunni region as the first step towards a return to power, or skipping that first step altogether and organizing a certain coup d'etat in Baghdad to return to power, which is what they always wanted? Certainly they don't recognize the post-2003 arrangement in Iraq. I have just described meticulously all the furniture found in the apartment, forgetting one thing, that there is an elephant in this apartment. The elephant in the apartment of the Iraqi Sunnis is ISIS, obviously. They are building a state, you know. So it's very relevant to ask whether they are in favor of a centralized state or in favor of a decentralized state, or maybe they would do with the 4 Sunni provinces plus a little bit of Baghdad or something like this. Judging by the process of Islamic state formation, this is one of the 2 innovations to the English language that I'm introducing, Islamic state formation. We're used to state formation, now it will be Islamic state formation. And by the ideology and statements of the organization, these guys despise federalism, Sunni and all. Their state formation is heavily centralized, almost like Maliki's vision. The contrary to Maliki's vision, but like a mirror image of Maliki we have here. The problem is that we have 2 problems. And this is my second innovation into contribution to Webster's dictionary. ISIS is Shiicidal. Shiicidal. Genocidal, Shiicidal. B, they do not stop at Iraq's borders. So where are we? Given all that, the measure of relevance of the whole debate on federalism depends on the question, how far is ISIS from Baghdad? I'm not so sure they are so far from Baghdad, as we heard Ambassador Falah saying yesterday. I'm not so sure, to use the famous hashtag that some Iraqi youngsters are now promoting, that Baghdad bikhair. Baghdad mu bikhair. So I'm not so sure about that. I'm quite worried about it, actually, and I think that ISIS is building up power to one day try and take Baghdad. The further ISIS is from Baghdad, the more relevant will the issue of federalism be. However, it is important to realize that this is not and should not be a technical debate over the implementation of federalism in Iraq. There are lots and lots of technical sides to the implementation of federalism. Maybe in Belgium they are in this stage of the implementation of federalism. In Switzerland, certainly. In the United States, they've done that. But in Iraq, it should not be a technical debate over the implementation of federalism. Federalism is not a must. The debate is about the best way for Shias and Sunnis to live together in a unified Iraq. I'm excluding the Kurds. The Kurds can have their own way, you know, the Kurdish way. Once Sunnis genuinely accept that the Shias are a majority, and as such, in a democracy, they form the government and enjoy hegemony. And once Shias understand that the Sunnis should not be treated as an inferior component in Iraq and a numerical minority, but as partners, Iraqis could solve their problems without resorting to federalism. That's my point.
Why am I laughing? Because I think it's a wonderful approach, but how do you get to that end point that you just mentioned? That's the question. Once you are there, it doesn't really matter. Thank you very much, Ronen. General Sattler, I would like to invite you to tell us of your experience, and also don't be shy to tell us what you say, what to your best judgment is the next step. Where is America here? What should we expect? What can we expect in reality? Because you have both. Because you have both feet on the ground. We know that.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll just stay right here. I'll speak from my base, which is obviously being one of the commanders on the ground, but also having the overarching view as the director of operations back in 2003 and 4, as we started to, we, as a collective body, the great country of Iraq and the coalition partners, started to build this federal government. And the whole thrust at the beginning was that the Shia had to understand that you could be a benevolent majority. And that was hard after being abused and put down for a long period of time. The natural is, it's our turn. It's our turn. You know what we put up with. You know what happened to my fill in the blank, brother, sister, relative. So this, even back in 2003 and 2004, was a very tough challenge, because you can't have a valid federalism unless there is some modicum of a sharing of the wealth, the oil, The revenues that come in, they're not all in the place they're found. They're distributed across the entire country. But it also goes into essential services, and it goes into security. So if you can't build an armed forces that is it's a cut of society. You couldn't have Kurd units, you couldn't have Shia units, you couldn't have Sunni units, because they were not just going to be home-based, they were national. So when they had to move to other parts of the country to perform their duties, they wouldn't be accepted if it was a pure ethnic unit. So General Petraeus and the crew worked hard to build these coalition units, which we have done also. If you look across the United States of America, when we integrated, when we did lots of things, the military was a step in our society to move those forward. So I thought when we were there that this was working extremely well. The training, the officer corps, it was a blend across, and I'm sure people would argue, maybe not fair in some units, but the idea and the prospect was high at the time in 2003, 4, 5, 6, and then during the surge when they beat the insurgency on down, and they finally, especially in Al Anbar province, we finally won the confidence of the Sunni tribes, where they said, you know what, we have got to pick a side here. The brutality of Al-Qaeda and the intimidation of Al-Qaeda is not the way we want to live the rest of our lives. We are going to side with the coalition and the Iraqi government, and that was known as the awakening or the flip or whatever you want to call it. But at that point in time, I think those of us who were involved in it thought this is the model. This is moving in the right direction. I certainly don't want to be part of any federal government or federalism where I don't think my security and the security of my family is going to permit me to go out at night to earn a living, to bring my paycheck home and raise my family without having to look over their shoulder or be afraid to go to the market, to school, fill in the blank. So I think we were moving fairly well there. Somewhere over the course of time, and also, you take a look and see how ISIS or ISIL, whichever one you want to use, how ISIS has moved rapidly through the Sunni portions of Iraq, then up towards the Kurdish sector. Why can't they be stopped? Why couldn't all the time and energy that the coalition put into training very, very capable, and I stress very, very capable Iraqi units with strong leadership, extremely well equipped, and with a backbone. The way these units fought down in Basra in 2006 and 7, and the way they fought in Fallujah against a very determined, dug-in insurgency inside of Fallujah, they did not break, they did not run, they stayed and they fought. And those were once again led by Shia, Sunni, with Kurds throughout those units. So when people ask me now, what's wrong? What has happened to the Iraqi military forces? Why can't they stand and fight a bunch of conscienceless, irreconcilable thugs marching across, performing just heinous acts that would inspire and motivate me? Even if I didn't have a dog in the fight, all I'd have to do is see that. And if all I had was a musket over the fireplace, I'd be grabbing it, and I'd have the will and the determination to fight. We saw that will, we saw that determination. The only thing that is different now that existed then was each one of those units, each one of the Iraqi battalions had a coalition, mainly U.S. Army, U.S. Marine, 15-man training team. They were called military training teams, MTTs, but for all intents and purposes, they embedded in there. They provided the role model. They provided the guidance for the leaders, and we guide our leaders. So it's not like you're born a leader and you don't need help along the way. So I'm not demeaning the fighting spirit or the leadership of the Iraqi forces, but that 15-man organization could call in artillery fire, could call in air support, could call in medevac support, could do medical immediate triage on the ground. And when you have that kind of confidence, that takes a good fighting unit, takes it from good to very good. And that's not there now. And that's how that happened. It's up for debate. The security framework agreement had the ability to leave that on the ground for a period of time. And I would say my take on it is Prime Minister Maliki dug in. He wanted to keep his country, to take it further and further away from that, I guess, the American flavor that may have been in it. and it disappeared. So now you have those same units, and I believe also over the course of time, and I defer to some of the gentlemen at the table, that a lot of that rainbow coalition of leadership, Shia, Sunni, and Kurd, inside those units, I think some of the Sunni leadership was moved on. And again, that some, possibly the leaders that emerged up may have not been the best possible leaders when you went down to just taking a look at keeping the Shia leadership in the military in those key positions. So I'll close here by saying I look forward to your questions. When people ask me, I just sat on a 2-hour panel yesterday on the Second Battle of Fallujah, and we talked about the courage and the fighting spirit 10 years ago this month that those 7 battalions of Iraqis came in. Prime Minister Alawi at the time came down and looked them all in the eye and told them, "You're fighting for Iraq, this is your country." He changed the name of the operation from Phantom Fury to Al-Fajr, the New Dawn. Prime Minister Maliki changed it the night before we went into the battle. He said, "That is not an Iraqi name. That is not what we are fighting for. We are fighting for the New Dawn." So that was the cascading, the moving of the Iraq military, and what I would consider in heading into that security arena, which I believe if you don't have, you can call it a federalism, but if everybody's looking over their shoulder and not trusting the individual on their right and their left because of sectarian or ethnic differences, it's not going to work. And I'll stop there. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Well, I suppose it's my turn to make a little contribution to the debate. But in the end, I'll ask each of you a question or two, and then I'll open the floor, of course. I disagree with Ronen, and we know that we have different views, not because his vision is wrong, it's not wrong, but because the question is, how do you get to this vision? What should you do in order for people to look at each other and say, okay, the other side is not taking advantage of me, it's not humiliating me, and so on. How do you get there? My very clear view, at least, is that federalism is an absolute must. Absolute must. In other words, either each of the muhafadat, each of the provinces, will be a federal unit, like an American state, or 3 of them together and so on. So it could be Al-Anbar together with Salah ad-Din, together with Nineveh, whether or not somebody else is questionable, like one region. Like the Kurds, they have 3 muhafadat creating one region. Then you must have, I have no alternative to that, to my mind at least, you must have National Guard in each of these provinces, or in each of these regions, 3 province unit or whatever. By the way, I wouldn't have any doubt that Basra and Nasiriyah and Amara will create a similar thing, a similar region. They actually would like to do that. It's not just Sunnis, Shias, and Kurds. Now, how did I come to the conclusion? Well, I have information that comes from, I cannot give you the source, but it's a very reliable source that has been staying in Baghdad for the last about 18 months, working precisely on that issue. A very distinguished person, but I cannot say anything more than that. And this man looked basically at all the groups he could reach. And because he's not American, and because he's not Iraqi, and I suppose because he's not an Israeli, he could reach everybody, or almost everybody. So he is partitioning the people, the sort of people whom he saw into ex-Ba'athis, or Ba'athis, whatever, Islamists, tribes, and politicians in Baghdad politicians. We all understand that this partition is very arbitrary. It's artificial. Everything is mixed. The same tribesman may be also a fundamentalist Islamist, he may be whatever. But it gives you basically a view into, an insight into the kind of people he contacted. Some of them are fighting today with ISIS. Others are just neutral. They're not fighting with ISIS, they refuse to fight against ISIS. Others are actually fighting against ISIS. I'm talking about Sunnis. And what he got is fascinating. He asked them, okay, what do you want? What do you want? And the results were almost identical when it came to all these groups. Immediately, in order to reach a point where you can eventually become the United States of Iraq. They want amnesty to the Sunnis, of course. They want to get rid of all the Shia militias in the Sunni areas, at least that, hopefully to completely disband them. But if they become part of a National Guard in Basra or in Babel, that's okay. They want ministers of interior and of defense that will be non-sectarian, well, whatever. And they would like, all of them would like National Guard for each of these provinces or regions. They want complete end to de-Baathification, all of them. And they want autonomy for these muhafadat, territories, that decided that they would like to be a region. Now, and these are basically what everybody wants. And it's not that they don't want Ronen's solution. Of course they do. They all speak about, for example, a Minister of Defense and a Minister of the Interior who will be non-sectarian. What I understand from that, they'll have to be Sunni. But they don't use that expression. I mean, the ideal is still Iraqi. Still Iraqi. We are all Iraqis. But in the meantime, until we get to become really Iraqis, we have to be sectarian. What can I do? What can we do? This is what they say. And I take it seriously because they had no reason to lie, because they know that this is coming amongst other places here too, to DC. So this is what they feel. I'll just say very simply that I'll be the first one to admit that if you are developing National Guards in each muhafaza or in each group of muhafadat or whatever, you are running a risk, definitely running a risk of disintegration, definitely. But most people here are American, and for that purpose, I studied a little bit the history of America. Today, you cannot deal with international politics without understanding America, a little bit. And I found out something, correct me if I'm wrong, but after the revolution, when you kicked the British out, each state, the first 13, each state had its own National Guard. And today, you know what's happening. The National Guard is a part of the national military. And it's being called upon to serve in Iraq or Afghanistan or whatever, wherever necessary. Now, I know that America went through horrendous ups and downs, especially downs. A civil war, I don't need to talk to you about the civil war here. I mean, the scars are still here. So, okay, I'm not saying things are always peachy. They are not. But look at the optimistic approach. That, to my mind, should be our approach. Now, what does it mean from an American point of view? And here, General Sattler, if you could give us feedback on that, maybe you are not sure, I don't know, but you are the only one here who really has a lot of American experience, strategic, military, overview. Can an American administration really, in reality, go to the Shi'is and tell them, you must give each of these areas their autonomy, the fairly extensive autonomy, like the Kurds, for example. You must agree to share the national wealth equitably. We can talk about formulas, but basically, in a way, nobody is going to be happy. If anybody thinks that this is going to produce a happy solution, forget it. The main principle should be that everybody, without any exception, will be reasonably unhappy. if you get to that point, you will have done a lot. So sharing the national wealth, building those national guards. Each national guard is based on the population of the area where it serves. The Iraqi military, the national army, doesn't have permission to go into any of those areas unless it is being allowed to do so by the local population, the governor of the muhafada or the majlis or whatever it is. In other words, for a while it looks like Iraq fell apart, but it doesn't. And I'll just end by saying, again, my view is that the most powerful aphrodisiac that will keep everybody in bed with everybody else is the oil revenues. Now, we heard about that from the Kurdish side, and I heard I heard a lot from the Kurdish side, I heard from the Shia side, I heard from the Sunni side. Basically, it doesn't make sense, certainly for the Sunnis, Maybe the Kurds, if they have now the areas where they're actually in control, can figure out a possibility of seceding from Iraq. Maybe, I'm not saying that they'll do it, and my advice would be there is no rush whatsoever, not to hurry, but at least, because they have Kirkuk and they have oil in Kurdistan itself. They don't have access to the high seas, to the ocean. That's another issue. So, but basically, the Kurds can somehow consider it, but they don't do it right now. And I think they are wisely waiting. There is no hurry. The Sunnis are going to be left with nothing. Nothing. Daesh, the people say Daesh is rich. Daesh is not rich. Daesh has enough to run military operations on the scale they do. But if you compare it to about $100 billion a year, now, maybe it went down now to $80 billion a year. Every single year from the southern, mostly for almost all of it, from the southern fields in Basra, Amara, Kut, this whole area, Majnoon fields and so on. If you think about that, this is a huge aphrodisiac. And as a Sunni, I wouldn't be so eager to separate. It is a good reason to try and stay together. And why should I, as an Iraqi Sunni, share this wealth if there is an agreement with Baghdad? If Erbil and the Sunni areas and Baghdad can agree, why should I, as a Sunni, share this reasonable wealth with the Syrians? I love the Syrians. They are Arab, they are Sunnis, those of them with whom I work today, but after all, they are Syrians, and I'm an Iraqi. So I am entitled to what Iraq can offer me. Share it with the Syrians? I'm not so sure I'm so enthusiastic about it. And these things are very powerful. So can an American administration go to the Shia and tell them, look, guys, you have to do that? And then go to the Sunnis, tell them, you have to accept it. In fact, those are their demands. And we start with that. And if you Sunnis don't do that, we are going to crush you, not by sending 250,000 American soldiers into Iraq. No, we shall just go home. We shall go home. And then the Iranians will come. The Safavis, they will come. How will you feel then? To be really tough, can an American president be really tough and say, this may happen if you don't behave, but if you behave, we shall help you build those National Guards, provide for them, the government will pay their salaries, but we shall train them and so on, and you'll have a balanced situation all over Iraq. I see this as an American investment, but it's not, I agree, it's an investment. It means seriously working on it and being ready for some very limited sacrifices. I mean, mainly money. But the sacrifice, and not even that too much, but the sacrifices are minor if you compare them to what would happen if America just pulls out and all hell breaks loose. And right now, I agree with those who spoke here in the previous colloquium here, that America now is in danger, definitely in danger of being portrayed as enemy of the Sunnis. It's not so simple. It's not so simple. So I don't know. Can America do that at all? Would they be ready to end General Sattler? Again, to you, it could mean that the president will have to agree to send, I don't know how many, 3,000, 5,000, but no more soldiers, unless you think otherwise, who would do exactly what you said here a few minutes ago. They will provide the local leadership, the local expertise, the local connection, if necessary, the Air Force, artillery, and so on. For a while, it could be 3 years, I don't know, until things stabilize again, but only after the Sunnis are part of the agreement. Before that, I would say it's a danger for you to become identified too much with the Sunnis, with the Shias, especially if you make now concessions to the Iranians over the nuclear thing, and then the Saudis will forget about the Israelis. They don't matter at all. That, to my mind, we just don't matter. But the Saudis matter. So the Saudis will say, what are you doing? What have you done? So these are the questions I would ask, and so please, that's actually my only question so far, and then I'll let you ask questions. Very good. General, can you try and answer that question?
Representing the Secretary of State is the guy who used to wear a military uniform here. And I had the opportunity for the last 2 years of my career as the J5, the Director of Strategy and Policy on the Joint Staff. That's the individual who sits in the National Security Council. So only because my secretary gave me a piece of paper for an award, I sat in over 1,000 National Security Council meetings the last 2 years before I retired. So I saw the work at the Deputies Committee and the Principals Committee as the U.S. government tees up policy and strategy for the President of the United States. And it was always the policy, regardless of the country, that a sovereign country has the right to decide its way ahead. So in other words, as much as we attempted to influence the Maliki government with, we need to be fair and equitable on the balance of power within the government, i.e. the president, the vice president, the prime minister, et cetera, and as well as the coalitions that were formed in parliament, we attempted to influence, but it was much more along the lines of, this is the good that will be gained if you embrace these policies, these concepts, these ideas. There's always the threat of, hey, well, as you said, sir, we'll pull out. We will back out if you don't come to the table and agree to agree. But if you think about it, Prime Minister Maliki said, get out. As we came forward with the Strategic Framework Agreement, which had already been agreed upon, a status of forces agreement tucked in there, a strategic framework agreement where the embassy would be larger. We would have military forces on the ground, both in the form of trainers and teachers, but also with a quick reaction force that could be at a certain location if in fact things went awry. And it was with this carrot, huge carrot, I would say, that was on the table. Prime Minister Maliki said, be gone. This was, he is the one that said it. President Bush had teed it up. The Obama administration had it moving forward. And Prime Minister Maliki said, no, I want you out of here. No trainers, no embedded trainers. Everything was removed from the equation. So I strongly believe in my heart, and I'm not sitting in the National Security Council. I certainly don't speak for the Obama administration or Secretary Kerry, but I still believe our policy is we will do everything in our power, policy-wise and strategy-wise, to move forward, to include completely flushing out a strategy. If you let us do this, we will bring the following forces, the following aid, the following government assistance, because it has to be a combination of military assistance, security assistance, and it also needs governance assistance to help people come together and move forward. And we've tried that. We've had it on the table. I believe it worked extremely well, thanks to a lot of young, hard-charging men and women, but it's not there right now. It's not. And that was the Iraqi government's choice to end that and push it on out. What I like to, and if I had a crystal ball and I could be Pollyanna here, sir, I believe what you said has a lot of merit. But again, if you're dealing with a sovereign country, you don't come in. It's an act of war to go in and force your way upon them. And I think we only go to that act of war when the vital interests of the United States are at stake. I'm not saying our interests aren't at stake in that region, because they absolutely are, but I don't know if it would cross the line into vital national interests with the use of force going in. Matter of fact, I don't believe it does. So I think the carrot is more powerful than the stick in this particular situation. We just have to make people aware this is good for you, and if they say no, it isn't, then we gave it our best shot. Pretty simplistic, but I don't have a PhD like everybody else at the table. I have a bachelor's and a 2.22, so let's be clear.
I suppose very realistic too. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much.